So Saturday is the day between Good Friday and Easter, right? And it's the day that we mostly don't know what to do with. It's the day that Jesus goes from being with his disciples, his best friends, his family, his followers, to being in the tomb. And it's that in-between space we're talking about tonight. Let's kind of set the table as to how we get here. So in Mark 14, starting at verse 32, it says, "They went to the olive grove called Gethsemane. And Jesus said, 'Sit here while I go and pray.' He took Peter, James, and John with him, and he became deeply troubled and distressed. He told them, 'My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me.'" Jesus knows he's about to be crucified, but when he says, "My soul is crushed," I don't think he's talking about the physical pain he's about to endure on the cross. We often think that's what he's talking about. That's the whole focus of his thinking and his anguish. But I would venture to say that his focus is bigger than that. Right? He knows he's going to endure the pain. He was born to do that. He's prepared himself to do that. He's been waiting to do that. It's why he came. But he's about to do something else. He's not just going to endure pain, he's about to cause pain. He's about to go away from his followers. He is literally about to die on a cross in front of his mother. When he says, "My soul is crushed," he's not talking about enduring the pain of the cross. I think he's talking about enduring the pain of what he's going to cause his followers to go through. Because he knows he's going to spend time in a tomb, come back, but then leave. He's crushed because he is going to cause his followers to suffer. See, Jesus is not invested in our happiness. He's invested in our growth into his image. See, he's less concerned about you being happy and more concerned about you being holy. And he will allow you to have dark days because he's going to do what it takes to bring you to the point of being like him. And oftentimes getting to be like him will not involve your happiness. It will often involve your pain, your suffering, your disappointment, your betrayals. All those things Jesus goes through. Mark 15. The officer confirmed that Jesus was dead. So Pilate told Joseph he could have the body. Joseph brought a long sheet of linen cloth, and he took Jesus' body down from the cross, wrapped it in the cloth, and laid it in a tomb that had been carved out of the rock. Then he rolled a stone in front of the entrance. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where Jesus' body was laying. Chapter 16, we skip ahead. Saturday evening, when the Sabbath ended, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Solomon went out and purchased burial spices so they could anoint Jesus' body. Very early on Sunday morning, just at sunrise, they went to the tomb. They are invested in Jesus staying in the tomb. They go there not for Easter. They go there for a dark Sunday. They go there for him to stay there. They are going through the suffering, the anguish, the pain. They have invested time and energy and years of their life to follow this man. And now this man is laid in a tomb. And they are prepared for him to stay there. That's why they went. They went to embalm him. They went there so he would stay in the tomb and have a proper burial. When Jesus was in anguish, when his soul was crushed, it was because he knew he was going to be causing his followers to go through that sort of pain. If you've ever lost someone you're close to, you know what that feels like. And this is what they're going through. This is what his closest friends are going through. See, most of the time, happiness is a distraction. Most of the time, when we face difficult situations, we try to escape them by seeking happiness. Jesus was not allowing his followers at this point in time to find happiness. He was doing something better for them. See, at that point, he is silent. At that point, Jesus is saying nothing to them. There is no voice coming from the tomb on Saturday night. And they have to rest in that. They go to bed that night, prepared for Sunday morning to go and embalm him. Maybe you have been in a similar spot where God seems silent. I want to challenge you that God is as loud in silence as he is in his speaking. See, God is doing something for them in his absence. We have to go through things like that to grow. We have to go through those seasons where God seems distant for our faith to take root. There is literally no other road to holiness that sidesteps suffering. It can't be done. If you were to read through the New Testament and you were to just look up the word suffering or trial or tribulation, what you would find is that it doesn't tell us to avoid those things at all cost. It says you will have those things, to go through those things, to drink deeply, to endure, to live in those moments. Because it's out of those things our faith grows. It's out of those things our faith takes root. We're not called to avoid suffering. We're called to embrace suffering. We're called to live in it. And God will often use his silence for a season in our own life. And sometimes we say, like, going through a dry season in my spiritual life. And what we often mean is, it seems like God is distant. It seems like God's not speaking to me. But he's using that. See, God is purposeful in those times in our life. He's making us grow. He's making us endure suffering because of what it produces in us. See, there are times when we watch other people hurt and we want to take it away from them. We want to come in and rescue them from that. But we shouldn't. It can be hard to watch somebody suffer. It can be hard to watch somebody go through hurt. And if I had the superpower and I could take that away from you, I'd have to second guess my intentions, because I'd have to wonder if whether God is having you walk through that hurt for a better purpose. Have you grown without pain? Have you learned the best lessons in life without hurt? Not usually. The day between Good Friday and Easter, when Jesus is in a tomb, is a day that his followers grow. Not much is said about it. In church circles, we don't often talk about it much. A lot of churches won't have a dark day event like this. This is the first time that we're doing it. But that night, Saturday night, is transformative for his followers. It is literally setting a course so that they're ready to endure the suffering they will endure when Jesus leaves again. He is doing something in their life that's forcing them to grow. See, oftentimes, as we're going through things, we're looking for that breakthrough, right? If I could just have this breakthrough in this relationship, if I could have this breakthrough at work, if I could have this breakthrough in these habits of mine, if I could have this breakthrough in my marriage, if I could have this breakthrough in this area of my life, in this thing. But let me tell you this, breakthroughs come after breakdown.
So after recording hundreds of podcasts, we finally encountered an error where the file was just empty partway through the message. And it was this Dark Day Service message that literally just went dark partway through. So I'm in my dining room and I'm going to just record a few minutes of comments to wrap this message up. See, breakthroughs come after breakdowns. We must have the calm after the storm. Like Jesus is in the boat with his disciples, and he probably knew the storm was coming, and he didn't prevent it. He allowed the storm to come, and then he brought the calm. He allowed them to endure the suffering before he brought the calm. To become like Jesus requires two deaths. See, Jesus died the first, and we must die the second. In Galatians, it says that my old self has been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live. And I think that oftentimes that part where we die to ourself happens when we break down. Happens in that moment of crisis when the hurt is too much, when the suffering is too much, and we realize we're just done. And when we hurt, it doesn't mean we are defective, or it doesn't mean that God loves you less. It just means God is allowing us to go through that because he has something bigger and better in mind. You can't shortcut grief or hurt. You must go through it. You must drink it all. See, as we journey towards Jesus, there is this idea, and he speaks about it a bunch of times, where he's using this illustration of planting and harvest, of an agricultural society. And the thing that always strikes me when we talk about the harvest in our own life is that when you think about harvest in a field, it involves a cutting down. If you think about harvesting in their terms, olives and grapes and things like that, it's a pressing out, right? Harvest is not this fun thing. It can be this hard, difficult. Harvest involves a cutting down or a pressing out. See, C.S. Lewis put it this way. He said, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Another guy, Rich Mullins, was making commentary in between some songs in a concert, and he described God as the kid who would beat you up and bloody your nose and then give you a ride home on his bicycle. That's a true picture of God. If you look at through the Old Testament, what you find is that most of the people that God used suffered. Noah faced rejection. Abraham lived through decades of waiting for the promise. David had to face death a lot. Daniel is known for his response to mistreatment. And the list goes on. They suffered. They endured. They went through the breakdown before the breakthrough. The harvest was a pressing out. See, this Saturday between Good Friday and Easter is this microcosm of what Christians must go through to become like Christ. We must have this. We must have this time of pain, of hurt, of suffering. It's what God uses to grow us. He was sharing this parable of the seeds being tossed out, and in Mark chapter 4, and he talks about the seeds being scattered along the path, and he's talking about the soil and stuff like that. And his disciples didn't really understand all of it. So a little bit later, he explains it to them. And so in Mark chapter 4, verse 17, he's talking about these seeds, and he says, "But since they don't have deep roots, they don't last. They fall away as soon as they have problems or are persecuted." And he's driving home this message that you have to grow. And growing is hard. And growing is this thing that we have to produce roots. And our roots have to press down. And roots are this cool thing in a plant that we never see, right? The roots are literally below our view. And the people who study them, the people who, botanists and arborists and those sorts of people, what they've come to understand is that roots are actually the most intelligent part of the plant. Like, the roots are able to press down and find the nutrients they need. They will literally spread out to the spot where the water is. It's incredible what roots can do. And the thing that strikes me is when you look at a plant, oftentimes we first think of the flowering part, or the part that produces fruit or leaves, and it's green and all this sort of stuff. But none of that happens without the roots. And roots grow underground. Roots grow where nobody notices. Roots grow in the dark spaces. Roots grow on the dark days. Roots grow underground. In the Saturday between Good Friday and Easter is this moment in time where his followers' roots are growing underground. In the space where it's dark. In the space where it feels lonely. In the space where it hurts. And God is using all of that. In our lives, we must be willing to walk in there and sit there for a while. There's this phrase we use in church circles and in Christian circles where we say when God closes a door, he opens a window. And I often take issue with these nice Christian sayings we have, and sometimes they have something that rings true, but they also have something that just bothers me. And the thing with that phrase that has always bothered me is sometimes I think that when God closes a door, he is closing a door, right? He is saying no. He is closing it, and he's forcing us to stay where we are, to sit where we're at, and to just be there. And what he's doing is he's making our roots grow. See, right, in a dry season, you know what happens to tree roots? They deepen. And when God says no, and there's this season of hurt, the season of dryness, this season that feels distance, our roots grow. See, the thing we must realize about God is he is good, but it does not mean he is always nice. See, there's a difference between good and nice. When God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, the promised son, that does not sound nice. And we know and believe that God is good, but in that moment, in those days, in that spot where Abraham literally goes up the mountain with Isaac and lays him on an altar and raises the knife, Abraham didn't think God was nice. And now we know how the story ends. We know that God says, stop, hold on, and God provides a sacrifice. But you must remember that first the knife was raised, and Abraham was ready to follow God. And I'm positive he knew God was good, but he did not feel like God was nice. And there's going to be times in your life where that is the truth you're walking through. But in those moments, in those spots of dryness, of weariness, of hurt, of suffering, of rejection, your roots are growing. God is using all of that for his plan and purpose to bring about holiness in your life. So walk in it, live in it, spend those moments there. Don't try to always escape it and seek happiness. In Psalms, it says, those who sow in tears will reap in joy. You won't have to always be in the suffering, right? Easter came, but Saturday was still there.